Hello, everyone. Welcome to Genetics Day 2. Let's go ahead and get started. So today's aim is, what is DNA composed of? So today we'll be talking about what DNA is made out of. And we're mainly going to be talking about those nucleotide bases. But first, let's take a look at the do now. So we can see here a long molecule of DNA. Over here, there is a chromosome, and we have this section labeled A. The section labeled A in the diagram is most likely a protein composed of folded chains of base subunits. And the DNA is made out of base subunits, but it's not a protein. DNA is actually code for proteins, so that is not it. B says a biological catalyst, which hopefully you remember is an enzyme, and DNA is not an enzyme, although it codes for the production of many enzymes. We have C, which says it's part of a gene for a particular trait. That one looks good. Or D, a chromosome undergoing a mutation. And we can see a chromosome over here, right? The DNA has been unspindled from this chromosome, but no, that is not a chromosome undergoing a mutation. We're not seeing, like, I don't even know how you would see that. But we do have, it's a section of DNA, and that section of DNA is part of a gene for a particular trait, right? So genes are within our DNA, and it may be many genes that code for any one trait, or it could be a single gene trait, like we saw in the Netflix Explained episode talking about like eye color, for example, that is controlled by a single gene. So a gene is a length of DNA, like we can see here labeled in A, that codes for a specific protein. So for example, one gene will code for the protein for insulin, which has an important role in helping your body to control the amount of sugar in your blood. So we can see there, this is a portion of a segment of DNA, and so it would only code for maybe part of a gene or one gene for any trait. And remember that on any given gene, it could be coding for multiple different traits, or it could need many genes or polygenic, multiple genes to control for any one trait. So that can be kind of confusing, but in this case, just know that this is part of a segment of DNA, which is part of a gene for a particular trait. Now let's move on and talk a little bit about DNA structure. So we can see here this famous structure, the double helix. So it's got two sides kind of looking like a ladder. And that is the structure of DNA. So if you ever see that molecule, that is a double helix. And we have here the base pairs, and they're always paired up like this, ATGC. And I actually had a t-shirt like ACDC, but ATGC. If I can find it, I'll wear it to school. So we have here adenine always pairs with thymine, and guanine always pairs with cytosine. The way you can remember that is all teachers, AT, go crazy. So AT always pairs together, and GC always pairs together. AT, GC, all teachers go crazy. So DNA, or deoxyribonucleic acid, is the hereditary material, and hereditary, remember, just means passed on in humans and almost all other organisms, including plants. Nearly every cell in a person's body has the same DNA. Most DNA is located in the cell nucleus, where it is called the nuclear DNA. But a small amount of DNA can be found in the mitochondria, where it is called mitochondrial DNA, or mtDNA, which is inherited from the mother. The information in DNA is stored as a code made up of four chemical bases: adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. So those are nucleotide bases, nitrogenous bases that make up DNA. And you might remember we talked about those when we talked about biomolecules. Human DNA consists of about 3 billion bases, and more than 99% of those bases are the same in all people. So that 1% of variation matters a lot, right? People can be very different. The order or sequence of these bases determines the information available for building and maintaining an organism. Similar to the way in which letters of the alphabet appear in a certain order to form words or sentences. DNA bases pair up with each other. A bonds with T and C bonds with G, right? All teachers go crazy. A is always with T, G is always with C. And we'll do a little practice with that at the bottom to form these units called base pairs. Each base is also attached to a sugar phosphate, which then makes the molecule a nucleotide. Nucleotides are arranged in two long strands that form a spiral called a double helix. The structure of a double helix is somewhat like a ladder, with the base pairs forming the ladder's rungs and the sugar and the phosphate molecules forming the vertical side pieces of the ladder. So the outer part of the ladder is the sugar phosphate backbone of this double helix structure. So the outer parts there, that is a sugar and a phosphate formed ladder. And on the inside, the rungs of the ladder are those nucleotide base pairs. So now let's go on to the questions. All right, so now let's look at the questions. What does hereditary mean? The passage of biological traits or characteristics from parents to offspring through the inheritance of genes. So hereditary is the passage of biological traits or characteristics from parents to offspring through the inheritance of genes. DNA codes for all of our traits. Speculate what you think mitochondrial DNA is for. What is the mitochondrial DNA? Mitochondrial DNA has the instructions for cellular respiration, right? That's what's going on in the mitochondria. It's the powerhouse of the cell and it has its own DNA. And your mitochondrial DNA is inherited from your mother and it is different from your nuclear DNA, which is something that could be much more complex that we won't discuss too much more in living environment, but you could discuss a lot in a college biology class. All right, the next question. What are the 4 DNA chemical bases? Adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. So if those words are a super big mouthful, just remember that A always pairs with T and G always pairs with C. All teachers go crazy. And so far, not yet, but it could happen. If there are 2 identical twins standing next to each other, what can we say about the percentage of their DNA that is the same? How about for a set of fraternal twins? So identical twins would have 100% the same DNA. They are coming from one fertilized egg or one zygote that's split into 2. Whereas fraternal twins are no more related than any other 2 siblings. They could have anywhere from 25 to 75 to even 100% in very rare cases, but most likely, just like regular siblings, they share about 50% of their DNA because they come from 2 different fertilized eggs. So why is DNA called a double helix? The double helix describes the appearance of double-stranded DNA, which is composed of 2 linear strands that run opposite to each other or anti-parallel and twist together. So now let's do this practice strand at the bottom. G, remember all teachers go crazy, pairs with C. A pairs with T. You know what? So G pairs with C, A pairs with T, C pairs with G. It's just a matching game. A pairs with T, T pairs with A, C pairs with G, A pairs with T, T pairs with A, and G pairs with C. And this will be a little different when we talk about RNA. But as you can see there, C, T, G, T, A, G, T, A, C, that is the opposite strand of DNA there. All right. And I do believe that is all we have for today. Yep, that is all we have for today. So today's aim was what is DNA composed of and how does it replicate? And we'll talk a lot more about how it replicates next time. But that was Genetics Day 2. I hope you guys learned something and have a super fantastic day. See you all tomorrow on Zoom. Bye guys.